how did hundreds and hundreds of thousands of votes shift, not in a progressive, incremental way, but in this almost complete, sudden, violent reversal. Remember, at the time these shifts are occurring, the people in lines are overwhelmingly African-American citizens and college students at liberal campuses. If anything, the shift should be going in the other direction.
In the early morning hours, reporters were closely monitoring vote totals in the last states to be called, including New Mexico.
Judy Woodruff, help our viewers understand why we're now going back from the too close to call green column to the white column, in which we don't have enough information yet to make any projection.
Well, we're trying to figure all this out right now, Wolf. Apparently what has happened is that the Associated Press, they were feeding numbers into us, and then suddenly those numbers changed. In other words, there was about, I'm told, a 2,000 to 6,000 vote margin between President Bush's position and John Kerry's position. And then that margin grew suddenly to an 11,000 vote margin. And because of that, we now want to make sure, first of all, we want to find out what happened. What I'm telling you is that the numbers changed, and sometimes these things happen.
People in the room got quiet. It was funny because we were all observing this on our own, but collectively, we knew something wasn't right.
They're in Karl Rove's office, several senior staffers, and they're calling into the states. They're clicking up on these counties, looking at the results come in. And the president himself popped in a short time ago and said, what's the holdup? The motorcade is on the other side of the White House. It is gassed up and ready to go.
All right, let's get some numbers for you. As you can see, President Bush right now has 51% of the vote. Senator John Kerry has 48%.
If he hangs on too long without conceding beyond the point where it seems reasonable and where the media, for example, are calling the election, then he'll look like a sore loser.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer in New York. 12 full hours after the last poll closings of election 2004. There's now an undisputed winner. The Democratic candidate for president, John F. Kerry, has conceded the race in a phone call to the Republican incumbent, President George W. Bush.
Earlier today, I spoke to President Bush, and I offered him and Laura our congratulations on their victory.
I think today there is more sadness than there is anger. They're just feeling pretty sad about the whole thing because, as Jeff said, and we've watched them, they have given their all.
I didn't anticipate this. I don't think any of us did. We looked at the polls over the last few weeks. Conventional wisdom was the president gets 48, 49% in the final polls. He's not going to get much more than that, maybe 1% more in the actual election. He got way over that, and I think that left everyone sort of puzzled. What the heck happened?
And the anger of the Republicans feeling that the press coverage in the early afternoon had been shaped by the exit polls, not that anybody actually talked about them, but that everybody had it in their mind. I think there's going to be a lot of hell to pay after all this alleged reform that these numbers were wrong.
David Brooks, what do you think's happened on the exit polls? Do you have a theory? I know nobody knows, but why the exit polls are so wrong.
We all rely on this stuff not only for predicting, but for trying to figure out what the electorate looks like.
I have yet to hear a theory of the case, in effect, for what happened, why it really happened.
We can never sweep under the rug disturbing questions, either because we don't want to face them or because we think it may advantage one political party and disadvantage another. Once that starts, the truth recedes even more.
If the Republicans, in fact, stole this election, the Democrats were willing accomplices. by sitting by and letting it happen and not challenging it. I mean, there is a sort of unspoken situation here where the Democrats don't want to raise these issues.
When Senator Bob Hagan saw his vote switch from John Kerry to George Bush, he tried to report what had happened to Democratic headquarters.
I touched John Kerry, and as I touched it, it immediately went to Bush. I called the Kerry campaign, and I said, I really think that this is a serious problem. We need to talk about this. You know, we should get it out. The press would be interested in this. But the Kerry campaign said, leave it alone. Don't talk about it. It's not something we want to get out.
For decades, Senator Hagan's district in Mahoning County had been a hub of political controversy involving both major parties.
When I was on the Board of Elections in the 80s, there was a Democrat who was Secretary of State, and he made outrageous rulings that helped the Democrats win elections in Ohio. That's the kind of system that we have, and unless people want to change that, that's the kind of system we're going to have.
Both parties toy with the vote when they have the opportunity, but at the moment, the sophisticated methods and the big money which drives those sophisticated methods using massive computers, massive mailings, databases, that is right now in the control of the Republican Party.
Even though the Republicans seem to control the voting technology and the corporations that count the votes, the Democrats have not exhibited a keen interest in addressing the situation.
If the Democrats won't support the Constitution and the Republicans will, then I'll stand with Republicans. If Republicans don't defend the Constitution and Democrats will, then I'll stand with the Democrats. And the great fear is that we'll reach a point where neither party will defend the Constitution.
Exit polls developed in the late 1960s for years and years were regarded as very accurate and reliable indicators of how an election would turn out. Exit polls in recent years have become increasingly inaccurate.
Exit polls, before they were adjusted, had pointed toward a Kerry victory. The official vote tally reflected a Bush victory. A 3% decrease for Kerry and a 3% increase for Bush equals a 6% discrepancy in the margin of victory. The margin of error is the maximum percentage one can reasonably expect a poll to differ from the actual results.
When you're dealing with statistics, you never get certainty. A discrepancy of 6% is so far outside the margin of error of that poll that statisticians across the board will give you general agreement that it could not occur as a matter of chance or statistical aberration.
Exit polls were a focus of concern at meetings about election problems hosted by Representative John Conyers.
Today, we at Zogby International, too, have questions of our own, many of which center on early exit polling results that were uncharacteristically inaccurate in several battleground states. This election has produced unprecedented levels of suspicion regarding its outcome.
There has been very little willingness to cooperate by those who hold the information, which would be basically the consortium of major media outlets. They claim proprietary rights to all this data.
That was the only checks and balances we had with these electronic voting machines. The electronic voting machines have no audit trail. They can't be recounted. We have to have some backup